Welcome back to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. Today's episode is absolute gold. I'm talking with Laura Jawad, a former research scientist with a PhD in oceanography, who left academia behind and is now a powerhouse SEO strategist. That's right, search engine optimization. It's how you and your business get discovered without having to post on social media. I had so much fun talking with Laura. SEO is a concept that can get really confusing really quickly, but she is so good at breaking down what it is and how we can use it to drive traffic to our website and blog. If you're itching to know how to attract clients without making reels or cheesy sales pitches on social media, this is the episode for you. And Laura has generously provided a free guide to walk you through SEO keyword research without getting overwhelmed. Check out the show notes for that link and some other resources. All right, let's get into it. Here's my interview with Laura. Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor, the podcast. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. In 2019, I was a political science professor who was fed up with the stress and hostility of academia, not to mention the low pay. I left my tenure-track job and went from barely surviving to thriving as a freelance academic editor. Today, I own Acadia Editing Services, an editing and coaching business that brings in 6 figures a year. In this podcast, I'll discuss the challenges of academia, what academic editing involves, and what life as a freelancer looks like. If you're willing to jump outside your comfort zone, it is possible to find joy, true flexibility, and a profitable and rewarding career as an academic editor. Thanks for listening. Welcome, Laura. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Paulina. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Well, I'm so excited to have you here. I love talking to other academics who have created these thriving businesses. And you are an expert in SEO, which is such a black box for so many people. And I know that that everybody's going to love hearing you explain that, as well as listening to your journey out of academia. So why don't we start there? What did you do when you were in academia, and how did you leave and end up starting your business?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you right off the bat, this was not a planned exit into entrepreneurship. A little bit of serendipity, I guess. But I have a PhD in oceanography, and I got my PhD in 2010. And I got my PhD on the East Coast. I moved to the West Coast for a postdoc at the University of Washington. After my postdoc, I got a staff position at the University of Washington. But I will tell you up front, I never loved being an academic. But I also never knew really what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was always good at science. I always cared deeply about the environments. And I enjoyed what I did, but it never felt like a calling, if that makes sense. And particularly in my staff scientist position, I was very unhappy. In 2016, I became pregnant with my daughter, my first baby. And it was also the most athletic time of my life. I was super into my triathlons and endurance running, and I wanted to continue all that stuff through my pregnancy and into my postpartum. And I found that the services and support that I needed were lacking. And so I began doing research into how to continue doing the things I wanted to do and do them safely. And then postpartum, how to kind of rehabilitate and get back to things safely, particularly with a few birth injuries. And as I did that research, I fell in love with that world, and also felt very strongly that I needed to share that information with more people. It was not easily accessible at that time. And so ultimately, I felt compelled to leave my position at the University of Washington, and I started a pregnancy and postpartum personal training business, and later a birth doula practice. And both of those businesses became booked out businesses. They went to wait lists. all built up with SEO. And so as those businesses thrived, I became like that colleague that people would come to for help with their websites, for help with getting found on Google. Because so many people rely on Instagram for visibility, but don't necessarily want to be there or aren't having good luck with that. So, long story short, I ended up productizing that service in 2023, and I began this business, which is what I do full time now. I do maintain a small personal training roster as like a side hustle, but this is my full-time work now.
That's awesome. I love that you went into the postpartum space because that's something that is really close to my heart. I was terrified of having, like a medicated birth. I read Ina May, right? All the natural birth books and all that stuff. And of course, because you have no control over how the kids actually arrive. My first son had to be induced because my water broke and he had no contractions for 24 hours. And then my daughter had an emergency C-section because she couldn't get out because the umbilical cord was in the way. But just like really tough experiences. And so I really appreciate that you went into that space to help people, because I think, even it's 2025 and yet there are so many new moms who just have no idea what to expect.
Yeah. And since 2016, there's been I would say there's been a revolution in this space, and the information available for pregnant and postpartum folks, and so I feel less compelled to be the person doing that work.
Yeah.
Right. I do enjoy it, but we could talk about, I'm also very multi-passionate. And so, I like to do different things, but there's a lot more support available now, but it's a space that can always use more.
Yeah. So how did you learn SEO? Did you just kind of do the research yourself when you were running the first business and then you got really good at it, or how did that happen?
Yeah, I sure did. I stumbled into SEO largely because I couldn't figure out how to market my businesses on Instagram. My personal training business started out in person, and the doula business was in person. But particularly when COVID happened, I feel like COVID is like it's in everyone's story at this point. I had to bring everything online. Right? No more in-person networking events, like no more in-home visits. It changed things. And everything that I was learning about online business and how to bring your business online had to do with Instagram and maybe a little bit of Facebook at that time, but really it was social media. And it was like post every day, sell in the DMs. That's how you're going to be successful. And I didn't have whatever it factor it took. And I wasn't comfortable there. I wasn't enjoying it. And, started thinking, well, maybe this is just not going to be a thing I do. But what I did enjoy doing, Paulina, was writing long captions. Like, that's what I enjoyed doing, right? Like, I didn't enjoy making short, witty things, but I did enjoy teaching and I did enjoy writing those long captions. And at some point, because I have some ego, I was like, I want to keep this work, and I put it on my website, and I started getting traction from it, right? So as I put more content on my website, I got more traffic from my website, and it was like, ooh, right, this is cool. Like, how do I get more of this? And so it was really, I think most SEOs are self-taught, right? At least initially, you learn on your own website. I have since taken courses, but I think a lot of the learning happens through experimentation, through, seeking specific answers to specific questions through blog posts and podcasts, figuring out which experts you trust and listening to them. And at this point, like I said, I've had courses and I go to meetings, but that seed was very much just experiential and learning through my own website.
That's great to hear because I feel like so many people, particularly academics, who think, they think, oh, I could never own a business. I don't know anything about business. I've never taken a business course or anything like that. And the thing that they don't realize is there are so many of us out there that our business training has been like articles on the internet and podcasts. And I mean, that's how I learned marketing, was listening to a ton of podcasts every day when I'd be driving to school to pick up my kids or drop them off or something. And it's like nowadays you don't need to have an MBA to run a business. You just have to be able to do research and learn. Which I think makes academics perfectly suited for being business owners, right? Because you know how to teach yourself things. You know how to consume a ton of information and digest it and then apply it. So that's great to also hear that you did something similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I mean, you're in this world now. How many MBAs do you know? I feel like the MBAs often go on to work for bigger companies, or I don't know what they do, but most of my entrepreneurial colleagues are on career number 2, and most of them do not have formal training. They've picked it up. They've learned it through experimentation, but no formal training required. And I think you're right. I think academics are really well suited for this because we are experts at learning. All of that said, I also think that academics would practicing academics would really benefit from like some courses in business because, as I spend more and more time in this world, there are so many moments where I'm like, God, like if my PIs had been able to run their lab group like I run a business, like how much better would life have been, right?
And marketing too, I think. I remember the kind of running joke is that you write a book in academia, but you don't ever make any money. And I thought, why not? If you're going to write a book, I want people to read it, And
God, there's your next business.
Helping academics market their books, maybe.
Yes.
We'll see.
Yeah.
So, given that so many people in my audience listening to this are new to business, why don't we start at the very basics of SEO? How would you explain it to us like I'm 5? What is SEO?
SEO is the art of getting Google to serve up your website as the answer to somebody's question. So if someone in your target audience goes and types a query into the search bar and you are an ideal match in terms of your solutions, your services, your expertise, you want your website to be served up in like those top 3 positions. SEO is how you make that happen.
And so then I would think that is it true that having more content on your website, like blogging and that sort of thing, is that helpful?
Yeah, it's absolutely helpful. But it's not just more is better. There is some strategy to it, right? And the content has to be, there's strategy behind like kind of the architecture, the information architecture of the blog. And then there's strategy behind constructing each blog post. But yes, you need a body of work in order for Google to understand where your expertise lies. You have to build what's called your topical authority. And you can't do that without some type of knowledge base, which most typically is a blog.
And so if I'm a new business owner and maybe I've got my homepage set up, I've got my services page and maybe my About Me page, just the basics there. And I decide I want to start a blog as part of that and start sharing maybe weekly articles or even monthly articles or something like that. How should I start? What kinds of what topics how do I choose my topics? How do I decide, maybe on that niche or that topical authority? How do I make a plan for going forward?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would have you do is to think about what are 3 to 5 areas that you want to be known as an expert in that support the core focus of your business. So for example, my business is SEO strategy and support. My core topics are sort of SEO basics, general SEO, WordPress SEO, and content marketing, like SEO blogging, right? Right now, those are my 3 areas that I really want to be known for. And those become like the categories for your blog. And then you want to create content that goes deep into each of those categories. So what you don't want to do is just create content willy-nilly, spreading yourself thin across a wide range of topics. You want to pick those 3 areas where you want to be known as an expert, and you want to go deep into those topics. And I recommend going deep into one, then deep into another, then deep into another. And deep can mean 3 to 5 articles, right? You don't have to write 100 articles, but establish a small cluster of content around each of those topics, and then link those pages together, right?
So it sounds like a good strategy might be, start by saying you're going to commit to writing 1 blog post a month, and you choose your 3 content pillars, to steal the term from Instagram or whatever. And maybe you write, 1 article a month for a quarter on one topic, and then another article a month for the second topic for the next quarter, and so forth. I always tell people to batch their content too, right? So maybe thinking of like a plan for folks who are listening going forward, coming up with those 3 topics, and then coming up with the subtopics for each article. How should people decide on those subtopics? If let's say their first pillar is maybe they work with graduate students and they want to help them publish their first journal article, would that be a good first topic? And then maybe the subtopics would be, more specific points under that umbrella?
Well, what would you call that as a category? Could you boil that down to like a word or 2? Would that be publication? Would that be, what would you call that?
Early publishing support or something like that? Or,
okay. So early publishing support. Then I would think about within that category of what questions is your ideal audience asking about that topic? What questions are they asking before they know that your service or solution exists? Right?
So maybe like, how do I choose which journal to submit to? That could be a blog post.
Yes, absolutely.
How to respond to peer reviewers, something like that. So those kinds of questions.
Yeah. You want to think about like, what are those questions that folks are asking before they even know you're the answer, or what questions are keeping them up at night, right? Like, what are they Googling in the middle of the night when they're like so anxious they can't sleep? And then you also can think about questions that are a little bit closer to sort of the bottom of your funnel. Like maybe someone's going to be asking, is it worth hiring a publishing coach? Or what does an academic publishing coach do, or how can they help me, right? So thinking about questions that span the range of, they don't know you exist yet, they don't know your solution exists yet, but they're asking questions that are relevant to your offers, and spanning all the way to, okay, now they know that your solution exists and they're trying to decide if they're going to invest in it. They're trying to learn more about that solution itself. So the other thing you want to consider when you're choosing things, so one is, answering questions that real people are asking, but also like, how are people going to find it? So I always like to keep in mind, and this is related to what we were just talking about, but literally what are people typing into the search bar that's going to lead them to your content? So you don't want to be writing in academic jargon. You don't want to be writing about things that you wish people were thinking about. That stuff can go in the blog post, but in terms of like how you're going to title it, how you're going to distribute it, I always like to think of the how. Like, how are people going to find this? because you don't want to write content that no one is going to find.
So I've heard there's all these tools out there that you can do keyword searches and stuff, right? And I remember when I was first trying to learn about this, when I was starting my blog, I went down that rabbit hole of like all these different tools. And it got really overwhelming because I was trying to figure out which one to use. And that's sort of the strategy. What you just described is the strategy that I landed on. Was I just had to throw out these other tools, and I just started Googling, like with a like an incognito browser, right? Because I guess the search results are affected by your previous searches. Yep. So I would search for questions like how to publish a journal article, and then I would Google suggests those other searches that people are doing. And that's what I ended up doing, because just to avoid the overwhelm. Is that a reliable strategy, or is it better for people to learn some of these keyword research tools?
No, it sure is. And then you can grow from there. So I'm going to, at the end of this, I'm going to share a resource with your audience called SEO Simplified, which is a keyword research workbook. And that's essentially how that, like, first order keyword research is brainstorming the words and phrases that you imagine, all these questions we just went through. And in the workbook, I give you a few more. And then going also to voice of customer research. So looking at like your intake forms, maybe doing surveys of your existing audience, asking how they found you, asking what questions they have. In my mind, keyword research tools come later. And I use them primarily for keyword research validation. So actually, like, if we want to get like a little technical about it, I would say what we've been talking about really is topic ideation. To turn a topic into a keyword, you have to validate it, which means you have to make sure that it is a word or phrase that people are actually searching for, and that it's a word or phrase that your website has a chance of actually ranking for. And so the validation process can be going into Google, making sure those topics auto-complete. And then Google is also because the auto-complete topics are words and phrases that people search frequently enough that they're indexed by Google. That means real people are searching for those phrases. And then the people also asked, the related searches, those are all really valuable for kind of sparking other ideas. The one keyword research tool that I do like to recommend to folks kind of early on who don't want to get really bogged down in the big tools, it's actually a plugin for Chrome browser called Keywords Everywhere. And that one is really cool because it provides search volume information and competitiveness information for your search queries. And what that allows you to do is to then also get a sense of how hard will this keyword be for me to rank for. And that tool also populates a little sidebar in your browser with additional suggested related keywords. And so in terms of keyword validation and keyword ideation, I think it's a really, really nice blend of like starting with your own brain and just getting like a little bit of input without the overwhelm of like a major keyword research tool. The trap you can fall into with keyword research tools is that you can also start to sort of meander away from what your actual audience is searching for. Like you get kind of caught up in like a shiny keyword, or, you know, it's easy to get distracted. So I think a really good first order strategy is exactly what you just talked about.
Yeah, it feels like it's like a balance, it sounds like, where you want to write an article that is answering a question that people care about, and that it is, you know, is well written, right? We don't want to be an academic or an editor who can't write. And so it's clear and it's well written, but it does contain a sprinkling of those keywords in it. So at what point do maybe you come up with the question for your first article, how do I get published in a journal or something like that? So you're saying that you should do a little bit of this keyword research and incorporate those words as you're writing, or do you go back and edit them in after you've written the piece?
I go back later. So I like to validate the keyword first, just to make sure that like I'm writing about something that people care about, right? I don't want to waste my time writing something. But as I'm writing, I'm not like constantly looking for opportunities to slot that in. And honestly, we're past the days of kind of what we call keyword stuffing. Like you're not trying to just use that keyword as many times as you can. When you come up with a keyword for your blog post, if we're talking specifically about blogs at this point, the title of the blog, the keyword should go in the title. It should go in the slug, which is that unique part of the URL that comes after like your domain /blog/ unique part of the thing. That's the slug. So you can use your keyword to create that. Your keyword should go in the metadata, which is information you provide on the back end of your website that helps Google, one, understand what your piece is about. So the SEO title in particular is a signal that Google uses explicitly to understand your work. So your keyword should go in your SEO title and then the meta description. And those two things influence how your blog post shows up in the search results. So your SEO title is the text in the blue link. Meta description is the text underneath it. Now, Pro tip and side note, Google rewrites the meta description about 70% of the time. So most likely, the information you enter there is not going to actually show up in Google search results. It just always thinks they can do a better job. But it's still helpful for context for the search engines. So still worth filling in. But yeah, use those keywords: title, slug, SEO title, meta description, image file names, and try to use it within the body of your blog post a few times. Maybe like first 100 words or so, in the conclusion, and like if you can get it somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the middle.
What about using headings throughout the piece?
You should absolutely use headings. Headings are really important. And what I see kind of a mistake a lot of people make is they'll just bold text instead of actually making it like using HTML tags. And when I say HTML tags, like your website builder does this for you automatically. If you select a heading, if you select an H1 and H2 and H3, it applies those. But those headings also help. Google looks to those to understand like what is the piece about, right? It's looking at the words you choose to use in those. And so it's worth using contextual words. Like you don't want to just have headings that say introduction, conclusion, right? They should be descriptive. And while you can use your main keyword in one of those subheadings, it's also a great place to use variations on that keyword. So there's always different ways to say a thing, right? And so I might struggle to come up with a relevant example for your audience right now. But if we think about like a question that they're asking, how like, publishing or how to choose a journal, you could say that in multiple ways, right? And so you can imagine that there are multiple ways that people might be typing that search into Google, how to search or how to choose a journal, how to choose a research journal, how to choose a high impact journal. Maybe there's different variations. And so those are really good candidates for words to use in your subheadings, but also just use related words, right? If it's contextual, it's relevant. So that's my biggest advice when it comes to the subheadlines is just make them really like descriptive and contextual and meaningful so that they, if someone were to just skim the headings, they would understand what your blog post is about. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that makes sense because
I got a little off track.
No, I think the stuff about the metadata and the back end stuff can be a little bit confusing, but
yep.
I think it makes sense, the process that we've just worked through, that you think of, you have these content pillars. And then, for each article, you start with a question that people are Googling. You verify that that is, in fact, a question people are Googling by actually Googling it and seeing, maybe using some of these tools that you mentioned. And then you sort of outline your article with those headings using the keywords and making sure that they're substantive, or they're, instead of, like you said, introduction, or, some other vague terms. And I think if people start, that's a great place and an easy place for people to start. Then they can start investigating on WordPress or whatever, website they're using, how to add the SEO title and all of the stuff that you mentioned. It seems fairly easy once you start digging into it nowadays with the way the websites are set up.
It is, and I'm confident that any of your academic audience can figure it out. But I do acknowledge that the metadata, if nothing else, it sounds intimidating. So I just added like a new page into my SEO Simplified workbook, which is a SEO title cheat sheet. And in that, I give very concrete examples of how to write the data for that field. And then I link to the pages on most of the major website hosting platforms of where to find the instructions for how to do that. Because I obviously, there's a lot of different website platforms. I can't explain them all, but I include the link. So if you're on WordPress or Showit or Wix or Squarespace, there's a link to their documentation that will show you where to find those fields in your website.
Oh, that's great. So if we think, instead of about just the blog, if we think about applying this strategy to, say, our homepage, does it work sort of similarly?
Yeah. So the goal of your homepage is different than the goal of your blog. So there's a concept called a marketing funnel, which, if you're not familiar, basically illustrates how people go from being aware of their problem, but not yet aware of your solution or your service. They become more aware. They become aware of your solution and service. And then as they become most aware, they're getting closer to being ready to buy, right? So if you haven't heard that phrase, it's marketing funnel. The blog post serves the top of funnel. Your blog posts are really aimed at folks who are still learning about their pain points, learning about their problems, trying to diagnose things, trying to figure out what the solution is. Your homepage and your services pages are for those more aware buyers, those ones who are further down in your funnel, who are closer to buying. And so the types of words that you're going to use on those pages are different. So your homepage isn't going to target a word like, how do I publish a journal article, right? Like that page is going to be focused more around, what do your people call themselves? Like, what's an example of a job title that they would call themselves?
Academic editor, or academic copy editor, or developmental editor, something like that.
Okay, so let's say academic copy editor. Like perhaps you're optimizing a homepage for academic copywriter. So then you want to make sure that's in the page title. So that's equivalent to your blog title. It goes in the H1, and that is typically above the fold is what goes in that first hero section. So as soon as you land on a website, it's the text that you see before you have to scroll. So your keyword should go in that box, right? But then you also on that page want to sprinkle in a lot of the other keywords that you're using all over your website. So you want to highlight all your individual services. You want to link to your blog and have like the 3 most recent blog posts automatically display. You want to have an about section that tells a little bit about you. So your homepage is a little bit more like a magazine cover. It's a little bit less focused. But in terms of keywords, you still want to make sure you're using like your job title, your full name, and you want to be talking about the specific services you offer, so that if people are Googling academic copywriter, your website's in the running.
So let's say I'm a client, let's say I'm an academic Googling copy editor, or usually they don't really use those terms because they're we call ourselves copy editors or developmental editors, but a lot of academics, especially the ones, like you're saying, a lot of people they know they have a problem, but they don't know how to solve it. They don't even realize that they can hire an editor. But if I do Google academic copy editor, we get all these agencies out there that, like proofreading.com, or I think that probably is a real website, but I'm just, throwing it out there, or whoever, right? All these other big companies that hire freelancers, and they have thousands of clients from all over the world who send them their papers to then send them out to these freelance editors. How do we compete with that in terms of getting ranked?
Great question. So one, making sure that you are addressing those top of funnel questions in your blog for the folks who don't know you exist yet. Two is trying to figure out, for people who are more solution aware, what do they call you? If someone is looking for your solution, what words are they using? Because you darn well want to be using those words on your website in the headlines, right? So if they're not calling you an academic copywriter, what are they calling you? And then can you go what we call longer tail? How specific could you get in that title? So instead of just academic copywriter, are you an academic copywriter for biologists? Are you a molecular biology academic copywriter? Are you a, what do you specialize in? And then how can you use that in combination with your job title to make that search term even more specific? And it can be your specialty. It could also be who you are targeting. Academic, molecular biology, academic copywriter for graduate students. How do you get more specific? When you get more specific, you get less traffic, but you get higher quality traffic, if that makes sense.
It does, because
it makes you more competitive.
Yeah. So on my homepage, I have a contact form, and I ask, how did you hear about me or something? And, people will say Google. A lot of the people who say Google are political science scholars. So I don't know for sure, but I suspect maybe they found me because they were Googling political science copy editor or something like that. Mm-hmm. I also get a lot of local people from Maine who find me, and I assume it's because I talk about how I'm from Maine.
Ding, ding, ding. Okay. So this is another huge strategy for small businesses, any small business. Serve your local community first. It's always easier. You're a big fish in a small pond, right? As opposed to a tiny little minnow in the ocean. So talk about where you're from. Create a Google business profile. Do outreach with your local colleges and universities. Literally, contact professors and talk to them and try, I'm sure that the graduate students in my program would have benefited from a seminar or a workshop that you could have done. Right? And it's a win-win. So contact some of these programs and see if you can get out there. There is a lot to be said for distributing your website and distributing your work in order to jumpstart your traffic. And I like that analogy a lot, the jumpstarting. If you think of an old manual transmission car, you push it downhill until the clutch catches, and then it picks up it turns on, and then all of a sudden it has its own momentum. Google's looking at engagement on your website, right? And so the more popular your website looks, that creates a virtuous cycle where it wants to promote it more. So if you can drive traffic to your website, you get the benefit of immediate awareness, and it helps your SEO in the long term. So do what you can to promote yourself locally. What you're doing is perfect, right? Talk about where you're from, create a Google business profile, and go start being a presence on these campuses, so that people are looking for you in particular, and you're driving traffic to your website, because that will jumpstart future traffic.
That's a really interesting strategy that I hadn't thought about before. But to, if you go give a free talk to a department, like maybe I go to the political science department at UMaine and give a free talk to their grad students about how to self-edit your dissertation or how to format your dissertation or whatever. And you ask them to, maybe I could even offer to write an article or something for them to post on their website that then links back to my website. Is that something that makes sense?
Yes. And so we kind of skipped this part of the conversation, but when we talk about what makes a website Google friendly, can I take a detour here?
Please. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about blog. We've talked a lot about content, but a Google-friendly website is more than just keywords and content. So I like to talk about 4 pillars. So keywords and content is one, and that's generally the most accessible one for most people, and I would imagine for academics. 2 is going to be user engagement signals, and we touched on that, right? The more people engage with your website, the more helpful it looks, the more Google is going to show it off in the future.
And when you say engage, you mean scrolling down the page, clicking on the links, that kind of stuff. Is that right? Okay.
Yep. Time on page, scroll depth, hovers, clicks, etc. Which, by the way, having a blog makes people spend more time on your website. So all of this is related. So we have keywords and content. We have user engagement signals. We have the technical foundations. And this is the stuff that's the hardest for a small business owner, right? This is the stuff that makes your webpage load fast, makes it look good on mobile, makes it easy for Google to crawl through all the pages and get them indexed. And then the final piece is brand reputation, which encompasses something called backlinks. Backlinks are links from other people's website to your own website. Google is trying to figure out which content is written by real people with real expertise. They want to promote helpful, trustworthy, credible information. And Google's a robot. It doesn't know how to trust. It doesn't have a heart. So what does it do, right? It looks to see, do other people trust you? And the proxy for that is links. So getting links from other authoritative, relevant websites back to your own website is absolutely key. And the most authoritative websites that you could get a link from are .govs and .edus. Those carry the most weight. And so if you can get, I haven't figured out how to get one of those for my website yet, but if you can get a .edu link to your blog post or your services page, that's gold. That's going to help you a lot.
That's brilliant. I wish I had thought of this 5 years ago when I was starting out editing. I wish I had met you then. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me that an editor out there could go to their local university or college, go to the department. Maybe they got a PhD in sociology or whatever. And they go to that department and say, hey, I would love to give a workshop for free to your grad students or to your faculty. And in exchange, would you be willing to write a little piece about it? Or I could even write it, and would you post it on your website, as one of their own blog posts?
Or offer to write a blog post, right? If there's a department blog, offer to write a blog post. If you've got a really great resource, like a really genuinely helpful resource, see if it's something they would post and share.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems like a really doable strategy for anybody out there, especially I know a lot of editors, including myself, hate posting on social media. And so it's really exciting to hear you sort of map out this kind of work that we can do sort of behind the scenes, I guess, without having to have this very public facing social media profile and doing all this posting, but we can still be driving traffic to our website and to our business that way.
Yeah. And it's worth noting SEO is a long-term traffic channel. Okay. It takes time. If you're starting with a brand new website or a website that hasn't received a lot of traffic yet, don't expect a lot until like 3 to 6 months out minimum. Right? But because I like to call SEO the bow we tie on all our marketing activities because it encompasses so many things. You do need to acquire these links. You do need to build your brand reputation in order for your SEO to really work. And those are things with short-term ROI. So as you're building your blog, as you're building your website, and then as you're distributing your blog posts, as you are doing these campus visits and outreach and sharing your links and getting in front of people, you're getting immediate exposure and brand awareness. The links they generate are going to improve your SEO over time, 100%. But you don't have to wait for the benefits of that short-term brand awareness to kick in, right? Like that's immediate. And so in order to really lean into this non-social media based marketing, you do have to do more than just post on your website. But it's absolutely possible to market your business without social media. Now, I think that, as I mentioned, one of those pillars is brand reputation. Backlinks are a part of that. They're not all of it. The other things that go into brand reputation are reviews and like your presence on other platforms. And so I think it's worth having a social media presence or two, even if it's not super active or super robust. But again, being able to establish yourself as like a real person, and I think for academics, for me, like I'm more comfortable on LinkedIn than Instagram. You get to choose. You don't have to be everywhere, but you do want to establish yourself as a person who's out there doing the things. And so having your name show up across platforms is important.
That's fantastic. I love that. So you could have a LinkedIn profile or even an Instagram, even if you're not posting all the time on it, but it shows that you're there and it gives you credibility. And you can be working on all these other things, starting to blog, starting to connect with universities, and just kind of keeping at it for 6 months to a year and seeing it start to pay off in that time.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Is there anything else you want to add or any other tips that you would give? Anything that we've missed?
The last thing that I would love to bring up, so you had Jen Liddy on recently. You guys talked about unlearning professor voice, which I freaking love. Like that resonated so hard because one of the hardest things for me when I started writing for my website was like not sounding like I was writing an academic research article every time. You do have to unlearn that. And one of the things, I mentioned earlier, there's like the sort of larger strategy of your blog in terms of setting up your categories and building the topical authority. But then for individual pieces of content, Google's evaluating experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness, right? And so within your writing, it has to be more than just encyclopedic. And I know for me, this was a really hard transition because I love writing encyclopedic content. I just want to research things and like write a research report and then like cite it all and, have it be very tidy. But you have to also, you have to demonstrate why you're an expert. You have to demonstrate your own experience, which means you have to get good at weaving in stories and weaving in personal elements to your writing. And so stories, yes, anecdotes, client success stories, photos of yourself or screenshots from your own work in your own computer, videos if you're comfortable, but showing your face, showing your process, making sure your uncopyable perspective is represented in your work. There's enough information out there. Information is a commodity at this point. And so like as you're writing and as you're building your website, you've got to infuse it with personality, perspective, expertise. It can't just be an encyclopedia. So that is something I've really had to take time to learn, and it's a skill that you hone, but I think is a really valuable one and one that your folks are more than capable of learning.
Yeah, that's great. And I think blogging is probably what a lot of academics feel most comfortable doing. Even if we have to unlearn the
Yeah.
scholarly writing style and learn more of the storytelling and the funny and the emotional and bringing in all that stuff into our writing. I think blogging is a natural next step or first step to learning that. I think if, like you're saying, if we can unlearn the professor voice like Jen talked about, and learn this sort of storytelling voice, that will probably also help our general marketing, our copywriting for our website and for social media posts if we go that route too. So
yeah, 100%. And I am more than happy to share a few blog posts that I've written about how to infuse your writing with personality and how to build know, like, and trust through your blog content, if that's something that would be of interest to your audience.
Absolutely. They love getting information. The more information, the better. So
who doesn't love information?
And so tell us how, if people want to work with you, how they can find you. And then you also mentioned that you had a guide to share with people.
Yeah. So as you might imagine, my major platform is my website. So you can come and learn all about me at laurajawadmarketing.com. And I do have a resource for you guys called SEO Simplified, which is a keyword research workbook, which will help you discover those words that will attract your right fit clients to your website. And there's some bonus tools in there like the SEO title cheat sheet. So if that's the piece that sounds hard, download that resource and you'll find it in there. And I set up a link for your audience, which is laurajawadmarketing.com/leaving-academia. So come visit me there. And then I'm also on Instagram at Hey Laura Jawad and on LinkedIn, and I can share that link as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to be downloading that SEO guide. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And once you download that, like you have a direct track to my inbox. And so academics, y'all are near and dear to my heart. If you have questions, if I can be a resource to you, please do not hesitate to send me an email and ask me a question. I would love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Paulina.
If you're unhappy in academia and you think you might be a good editor or writing coach, check out my course, Becoming an Academic Editor. This digital course is paired with a 12-week group coaching program to support you through your decision to leave academia or not, and to start building a profitable and rewarding academic editing business. Learn more by going to acadiaediting.com/become an editor. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.